The great hall of the Sci-Fi Empire was silent. Thousands of insectoid warriors lined the dark metallic walls, their black eyes reflecting the dim purple glow of bioluminescent orbs. At the center of the chamber, high on a throne of woven chitin and metal, sat Queen Traxa, ruler of the Sci-Fi. Her tall, slender body shimmered with iridescent blues and greens, her 6 arms folded as she stared down at the human before her. Captain Elias Carter stood firm, though he could feel the weight of her gaze. He was the only human in the entire room, surrounded by towering alien figures who could crush him in an instant. But fear was a luxury he could not afford. Humanity was on the edge of extinction. The long war against the Vothul Dominion had drained Earth's resources and claimed millions of lives. The Sci-Fi, once neutral observers, had suffered as well. Their colonies, caught between the chaos of war, were falling apart. Their genetic lines were breaking down due to centuries of controlled breeding. Without new blood, they would soon perish. That was why Elias was here. "Your proposal is madness." The Queen finally spoke. Her voice was deep and layered, echoing through the chamber like a chorus of voices speaking at once. "Humans and Sci-Fi are too different. Our genetics do not mix. Your science is foolish to think otherwise." Elias took a slow breath. He had expected resistance, but he had come prepared. "With respect, Your Majesty, your people are dying. You have lost 3 entire generations in the last 50 years. Your species is at risk." He let his words settle before adding, "And so is mine." The Queen's large black eyes narrowed. She did not like being reminded of her empire's weakness. "We are warriors. We will survive." "No," Elias said, taking a step forward. Several Sci-Fi warriors twitched, their clawed hands tightening on their weapons, but he did not stop. "You will not survive. You are running out of time. And we, humanity, are running out of allies." A low, buzzing murmur spread through the hall. The Sci-Fi did not like the truth, but they could not deny it. The war with the Vothul had destroyed entire worlds. If something didn't change, both species would fall. Elias raised his chin. "But together, we have a chance." The Queen tilted her head. "You wish to make an alliance." "Not just an alliance," Elias said, shaking his head. "A future." The Queen's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Explain." Elias tapped on his wrist communicator, and a holographic image flickered to life. A complex diagram appeared: genetic sequences, DNA strands, and models of hybrid organisms. "Our scientists have discovered a way to merge our genetics," Elias said. "Not in the traditional way. Our species cannot reproduce naturally. But with controlled bioengineering, we can create something new." He turned to the Queen, his expression serious. "Your body, Your Majesty, is the key." The murmuring grew louder. Some of the Sci-Fi warriors hissed in shock. Others stared in disbelief. The Queen was sacred. She was the mother of their kind. To suggest altering her very nature was blasphemy. Traxa's claws dug into her throne. "You dare suggest I become an experiment?" "No," Elias replied calmly. "I suggest you become the savior of both our peoples." Silence fell once more. The Queen's gaze did not waver, but something in her expression changed. Elias pressed on. "If we succeed, you will no longer be limited to producing only Sci-Fi offspring. Your next generation will be part human, stronger, adaptable, capable of surviving in new environments." He gestured around the hall. "Your people will not fade. They will evolve." The Queen's fingers tapped against the throne, the rhythmic sound filling the air. She was considering his words. Elias knew she was a ruler who valued survival above all else. If she saw this as a path to saving her people, she might agree. A long moment passed before she finally spoke. "And what do humans gain from this?" Elias exhaled in relief. She was no longer rejecting the idea outright. That was a start. "We gain what humanity has always needed, a future. The war has taken everything from us. But your people are strong, disciplined, and united. If our species join together, we will have warriors, strategists, and an unbreakable bond. He took a step closer, locking eyes with the alien queen. We will never be weak again. Ztraxa studied him carefully. Elias could feel the weight of her decision. If she said yes, history would change forever. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she leaned forward. If this fails, she said, her voice low and dangerous, I will make sure humanity pays the price. Elias swallowed but nodded. Understood. The queen turned to her advisors. Prepare the genetic chambers. We begin immediately. The ex-Iraq warriors erupted in a mixture of alarm and approval. Some protested, but the queen's decision was law. Elias let out a slow breath. The first step had been taken. As the queen's attendants led him toward the genetic facility deep within the hive, he couldn't help but wonder, had humanity just saved itself, or had they created something they could never control? One thing was certain, there was no turning back. The laboratory was deep within the ex-Iraq hive, hidden away in the heart of their capital world. The walls pulsed with a faint blue glow, made of organic material that reacted to movement. Strange machines hummed softly, their insect-like limbs moving with precision as they prepared for something never attempted before. Queen Ztraxa stood in the center, her tall frame rigid, her 6 arms folded in silent contemplation. She had ruled for centuries, guiding her people through war and survival, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. She was about to change forever. Across from her, Captain Elias Carter observed the process, his arms crossed. He had done the impossible, convinced an alien queen to accept human science. Now he could only hope it worked. A Sci-Fi scientist approached, his large compound eyes reflecting the dim light. The modifications are ready, Your Majesty. Ztraxa did not respond immediately. She looked at the cylindrical chamber before her, a pod filled with shimmering golden liquid designed to break down her existing genetic code and rewrite it with the engineered human ex-Iraq hybrid sequence. Elias noticed her hesitation. He stepped forward. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. The queen turned her head sharply, her mandibles clicking. No, I must. My people are dying, Captain Carter, and so are yours. Elias held her gaze. He had spent enough time negotiating with alien leaders to understand their pride. She would never back down. Not now. Ztraxa moved toward the chamber and stepped inside. The golden liquid began to rise around her, covering her chitinous body, surrounding her completely. The glass sealed shut, and the machines whirred into motion. Elias watched as the process began. For the first time in history, a Xyrak queen would evolve beyond what nature had designed. The transformation. The process took hours. Xyrak scientists monitored every detail, adjusting the machines, studying the data. Inside the pod, Ztraxa's body changed at a microscopic level. Her DNA strands unraveled and rewove themselves, merging with human sequences. It was a delicate balance. Too much change, and she would not survive. Too little, and the experiment would fail. Elias paced back and forth. The tension in the room was thick. The ex-Iraq warriors stationed nearby watched him with unreadable expressions. They had accepted their queen's decision, but doubt lingered in their eyes. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the machines powered down. The golden liquid drained away. The pod's glass door slid open, and Ztraxa stepped out. At first glance, she still looked like the queen of the Tyrak. Her body remained tall and powerful, her exoskeleton gleaming with dark iridescent colors. But something was different. Her posture was looser, more fluid. Her eyes, once purely insectoid, now had a depth to them, a hint of something new. Elias held his breath. Your Majesty. Ztraxa blinked slowly, her large black eyes locking onto him. And then, to everyone's shock, she spoke in perfect English. It worked. The first signs of change. The hive was in an uproar. The queen had changed. Her advisors studied her with fascination and fear. Some were in awe. Others whispered among themselves, afraid of what this meant. Could she still be their queen? Would she still lead them? Ztraxa ignored the murmurs and focused on the strange sensations within her body. For the first time in her long life, she felt something foreign, a connection that had not been there before. Elias noticed her confusion. "What is it?" She hesitated before answering. "I sense them." Elias frowned. "Sense who?" Ztraxa turned her gaze toward the chamber where the first hybrid embryos were being grown, bioengineered beings made from both human and Xyrak genetic material. She could feel their presence in a way she had never experienced before. Not just as a ruler, but as something else, as a mother. The realization struck her like lightning. The connection she once only had with pure Xyrak offspring now extended to these hybrids. It was stronger, deeper, an instinct she had never known. Elias saw the change in her expression. "You can feel them, can't you?" She nodded slowly. "This is not what I expected." Uncertain reactions. The news spread quickly. Within hours, the entire Xyrak Empire knew of their queen's transformation. Some saw it as a miracle, a new future for their species. Others saw it as an abomination. A high council, a group of elder Xyrak who advised the queen, called an emergency meeting. Elias attended, standing beside Ztraxa as they faced a hall full of skeptical leaders. One of the elders, his kitten dark with age, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, what have you done?" Ztraxa's voice was calm but firm. "I have ensured our survival." The elder clicked his mandibles in disapproval. "This is unnatural. You are no longer purely Xyrak." Elias clenched his jaw. He knew this would happen. Change was always met with resistance. "She is still your queen," he said sharply, "and she's stronger than ever." The elder ignored him, focusing on Ztraxa. "And these hybrids, what place do they have in our empire? Are they Xyrak? Or are they something else?" Ztraxa did not hesitate. "They are the future, the beginning of a new era." That night, Ztraxa stood alone in the chamber where the hybrid embryos were growing. The soft hum of the machines filled the air. She placed one clawed hand against the glass, feeling the strange connection again. Elias approached. "You okay?" She did not look at him. "I was born to be the mother of the Xyrak." Her voice was quieter than usual. "But now I am something more." Elias watched her carefully. "Does that scare you?" Ztraxa turned to face him. For the first time, she smiled, a small, almost human expression. "No," she said. "It excites me." Elias exhaled, nodding. "Then let's see where this leads." Neither of them knew what the future would bring. But one thing was certain. The galaxy was about to change forever. For the first time in Xyrak history, something completely new had been created. The Queen's transformation had changed everything. But it was only the beginning. Deep within the genetic chambers, floating inside protective incubation tanks, were the first human Xyrak hybrids. Captain Elias Carter stood in the dimly lit laboratory, staring at the growing embryos. He had seen many incredible things in his life. Alien worlds, massive space battles, technology beyond human imagination. But this was different. Beside him, Queen Ztraxa observed the same sight, her black eyes filled with a strange mix of emotions. She had always been a mother to the Xyrak, but now she was a mother to something entirely new. "They are growing faster than expected," one of the Xyrak scientists reported, his voice filled with unease. "The genetic fusion is stable. No signs of rejection." Elias folded his arms. "That's good news, isn't it?" The scientist hesitated. "Yes, but it is also unpredictable. We do not know how they will develop, how they will think." His antennae twitched nervously. What if they are not Xyrak? What if they are not human? Ztraxa's voice was calm but firm. Then they will be something greater. A divided hive. Not everyone saw it that way. News of the Queen's transformation had already caused division among the Tyrak. Now, the knowledge that hybrid children were growing in the heart of their empire was too much for some to accept. Elias walked through the hive's main tunnels, where Tyrak workers and warriors moved with tense energy. He could hear them whispering, "This is wrong. She has changed. She is no longer one of us. These hybrids, what if they turn against us?" The tension was growing, and Elias knew that tension, if left unchecked, could become something worse. Rebellion. He made his way to the Queen's throne chamber, where a group of high-ranking ex-Iraq warriors had gathered. Their leader, Commander Votur, stepped forward. His exoskeleton was scared from battles, and his 4 arms rested on the hilts of his twin energy blades. "Queen Zatraxa," Votur began, his voice deep and unwavering. "We have followed you for many cycles. We have fought and bled for the survival of our species." His mandibles clicked. "But this goes against everything we know." Zatraxa remained seated on her throne, her gaze unreadable. "You question my decision. I question if you are still fit to lead." A hush fell over the chamber. The challenge had been spoken. Elias tensed. This was dangerous territory. If the Queen lost control now, she could lose her empire. Zatraxa slowly stood, towering over the warriors before her. "Tell me, Votur, when the Vothul destroyed our colonies, did I not lead us to victory?" Votur hesitated. "You did. When the famine struck our world, did I not ensure our survival?" Again, he nodded. "You did." Zatraxa stepped closer. "And now, when our species faces extinction, I have found a way to save us. You doubt me because you fear change." Her voice lowered, dangerous. "But change is the only way forward." Votur's claws twitched. "And if we refuse this change?" Elias stepped forward now, his voice steady. "Then you doom your own people." The room was silent. Finally, after a long pause, Votur exhaled. "I will follow you, my queen." But then he turned his black eyes toward Elias. "But I do not trust him." Elias smirked. "That makes 2 of us." The first awakening. 3 weeks later, it happened. The first of the hybrids opened their eyes. Inside the laboratory, the incubation tanks glowed softly. The ex-Iraq scientists worked quickly, monitoring the life signs of the growing children. Their bodies were a perfect blend. The sleek exoskeleton of the ex-Iraq mixed with the softer features of humans. Their fingers had claws, but their faces were expressive. Their eyes held intelligence, but it was different from both species. They were something new. The first child to wake stirred inside the tank, its large, dark eyes blinking open for the first time. It turned its head slowly, looking around. Then, its gaze locked onto Zatraxa. Elias saw it happen and realized something instantly. It recognizes her. Zatraxa took a step closer, placing one clawed hand against the glass. The hybrid child reached up, pressing its smaller hand against the same spot. A connection formed, one deeper than words, a bond between mother and child. Elias felt something shift in the air. This wasn't just a scientific experiment anymore. This was history being made. Zatraxa's voice was soft. "You are the first, but not the last." The hybrid child blinked again. Then, for the first time in ex-Iraq history, it did something no ex-Iraq had ever done before. It smiled. A new future, a new fear. Elias leaned against the control panel, watching the scene unfold. The hybrids were waking, one by one. The Queen had accepted them. The hive would have to follow. But in the shadows of the hive, not everyone was celebrating. A group of warriors gathered in secret. Their voices were low, their eyes filled with suspicion. "This is not our way. She is no longer our queen. The hybrids will replace us." One of them, taller, stronger, and burning with quiet rage, stepped forward. His voice was dark with certainty. "We must act, before it is too late." In the laboratory, Ztraxa remained unaware of the growing danger. Her focus was on the children, the first of their kind. But Elias? He knew something was coming. Change was never easy, and some would rather destroy the future than embrace it. He clenched his fists. The real battle hadn't even begun. For the first time in Sci-Fi history, something completely new had been born. The hybrid children, a fusion of human and Sci-Fi genetics, were alive. They were growing, and they were learning faster than anyone had expected. But not everyone saw this as a miracle. Deep within the lower tunnels of the hive, away from the Queen's throne and the human visitors, a group of warriors gathered in secret. Their voices were hushed, their eyes dark with doubt. They had served Queen Ztraxa for years, but now they questioned if she was still their queen. Commander Votur, the strongest of them, stood at the center of the meeting. His sharp claws tapped against the stone floor as he spoke. Our queen has changed. She is no longer purely Xirak. His voice was firm, filled with quiet anger. And now she has created them. The warriors murmured in agreement. We have lived by the laws of our ancestors, Votur continued. We have fought, survived, and conquered as Xirak. But now, the Queen asks us to accept these hybrids, creatures who are not truly one of us. One of the younger warriors, his exoskeleton still smooth and unscarred from battle, hesitated. But the Queen says they will save our species. Votur turned sharply. No, they will replace our species. Silence filled the chamber. Then, another warrior spoke, his voice low. What do you propose, Commander? Votur's mandibles twitched. He had already made his decision. We must act, he said, before it is too late. The children of two worlds. Meanwhile, in the heart of the hive, the hybrid children were growing at an astonishing rate. Captain Elias Carter stood beside Queen Ztraxa, watching as the young hybrids moved through the training chamber. Unlike Xirak hatchlings, who followed strict instincts, the hybrids were different. They were curious. They explored. They asked questions. Elias smiled as he watched one of them, a small, bright-eyed child named Kel, trying to build something with his claws. He was stacking pieces of stone, experimenting with shapes. It was play, something no Xirak hatchling had ever done before. They learned fast, Elias said, crossing his arms. Ztraxa nodded. Faster than expected. Elias glanced at her. Since her transformation, she had changed more than just physically. She understood emotions now. She could feel connections in ways no Xirak had before, and because of that, she felt something deep inside. A mother's instinct. They are mine, she said softly. I did not expect to feel this way. Elias chuckled. Welcome to parenthood. She turned to him, tilting her head. Is this how human mothers feel? Elias thought for a moment. Not exactly, but kind of. Ztraxa looked back at the children. Then I understand now why humans fight so hard for their young. Elias was about to respond when an alarm blared through the hive. His smile faded. Something was wrong. The betrayal. In the central war chamber, Queen Ztraxa stood tall as a group of warriors entered. Their movements were sharp, their expressions tense. Votur led them, his stance rigid with unspoken challenge. Elias could feel the shift in the air. This was not just a disagreement anymore. This was rebellion. Votur stopped before the Queen and bowed slightly. But it was not a bow of respect. It was a gesture of formality, nothing more. My Queen, he began, his voice measured. We have come to speak on behalf of the warriors who are concerned. Ztraxa's eyes narrowed. Concerned. Votur straightened. About the hybrids. About the changes you have made to yourself. About the future of our people. Elias clenched his fists. He could see where this was going. The hybrids are our future, Ztraxa said firmly. They are strong. They are intelligent. They are our evolution. Votur's mandibles clicked. Or they are our replacement. Silence filled the chamber. Then, another warrior stepped forward and tossed something onto the floor. It clattered against the stone. Elias looked down, and his blood ran cold. It was a piece of a hybrid child's armor, torn, scratched. Straxa took a step forward, her voice dangerously low. "What have you done?" Voter did not flinch. "We have corrected a mistake." Rage flickered in the queen's black eyes. The air in the chamber felt heavier. Elias had never seen her like this before. "You harmed my children," she said softly. Voter straightened. "We protected our species." Elias stepped forward. "You don't get to decide that." Voter's hand moved to his weapon. In an instant, the room erupted into chaos. The battle begins. The queen's loyal warriors clashed with Voter's rebels. Claws tore against armor. Energy blades crackled as they met in violent strikes. The hive's war chamber became a battlefield. Elias grabbed his sidearm, dodging the Xtyrak warrior's attack. He fired, hitting the enemy's armor and knocking them back. But there were too many of them. Straxa moved like lightning. She struck down 2 rebels in a single motion, her new strength making her faster than any Xtyrak before her. But Voter was just as strong. He lunged at her, his twin blades aimed at her chest. She blocked with her upper arms and struck with her lower ones, sending him crashing into a pillar. Elias fought his way toward her. "We need to get out of here." The queen's mandibles tightened. "I do not run." Elias pointed toward the entrance. More rebels were pouring in. "This isn't a battle," he said. "It's a coup." Straxa hated the thought of retreating. But she wasn't just a queen anymore. She was a mother. "We go to the children," she said. Elias nodded. "Then let's move." As they fled through the tunnels, the sounds of battle echoed behind them. The queen and the captain knew one thing. This war had only just begun. The hive was no longer safe. Elias Carter ran alongside Queen Straxa, their footsteps echoing through the dimly lit tunnels. Behind them, the sounds of battle grew louder. Clashing weapons, the screeches of wounded Xtyrak warriors, and the heavy thud of falling bodies. The rebellion had begun, and Voter's forces were winning. Straxa's black eyes were filled with fury. She had ruled this hive for years, led her people through war and famine, only to be betrayed by those who feared change. But now, she wasn't just fighting for her throne. She was fighting for her children. "We must reach the hybrid chamber," she said, her voice sharp. "They are still too young to defend themselves." Elias nodded, gripping his sidearm. "If Voter gets to them first." Straxa's mandibles tightened. "I will not allow it." The 2 warriors pushed forward, navigating the twisting corridors. The hive was massive, a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers carved deep into the rocky surface of the Xtyrak homeworld. Elias had been here long enough to know the layout, but right now, time was their enemy. The queen suddenly stopped. Her antennae twitched. Something was wrong. Before Elias could react, she grabbed his arm and pulled him into the shadows. A second later, a patrol of rebel warriors stormed past them, weapons drawn. Elias exhaled quietly. That was close. Straxa's voice was grim. "Voter's forces are already moving toward the hybrid chamber." Elias clenched his fists. "Then we need to be faster. The hybrid's in danger." Inside the incubation chamber, the young hybrids sensed the danger before they could see it. Kale, the firstborn, pressed his small, clawed hands against the glass of his protective pod. His large, intelligent eyes darted toward the entrance. The other children, his brothers and sisters, shifted uneasily. They felt something coming. The Xtyrak scientists, who had been monitoring them, exchanged nervous glances. One of them, an elder named Draska, moved quickly to the control panel. "The queen gave orders to protect them," he said. "We must prepare for evacuation." But before they could act, the doors burst open. Voter stood at the entrance, his warriors behind him. Their weapons glowed with deadly energy. Draska stepped forward. "Commander Voter," he said, voice firm, The Queen has not given you permission to be here. Vatur's mandibles twitched. The Queen has betrayed our people. He took another step forward, his black eyes locked onto the hybrid children. And these creatures are proof of her madness. Kale watched him carefully. Though he was still young, something deep in his mind understood the danger. Vatur raised his weapon. These experiments end now. A mother's wrath. Before Vatur could strike, the wall beside him exploded. Rock and debris flew through the air as Queen Zitraxa charged into the room, her powerful arms slamming into the nearest rebels. Elias followed right behind her, firing his weapon with deadly accuracy. The rebels stumbled back, momentarily stunned by the sudden attack. Zitraxa's black eyes locked onto Vatur. She did not speak, she only attacked. Their weapons clashed as the two strongest Iraq warriors fought with deadly precision. Vatur was fast, his twin blades cutting through the air in a blur. But Zitraxa was faster. She dodged one strike, blocked another with her lower arms, then struck with her upper ones, sending Vatur crashing into the incubation pods. Glass shattered. Kale and the other hybrids stumbled out, their small bodies now exposed to the chaos around them. Elias saw them and moved fast. He grabbed Kale, shielding him as energy blasts flew through the air. The other hybrids huddled together, their wide eyes filled with fear. Vatur growled, pushing himself up. He pointed at the children. They are an abomination. Zitraxa roared in fury. They are our future. She lunged again. The two warriors clashed in the center of the chamber, their fight shaking the very walls of the hive. But Elias knew they didn't have time for this. The battle was still raging outside, and more rebels would arrive soon. He turned to Draska. We need an escape route. Now. Draska hesitated, then nodded. There is a hidden tunnel beneath the incubation chamber. Elias didn't waste time. Then open it. The escape begins. Draska activated the hidden controls. A section of the floor slid open, revealing a dark tunnel leading deep into the underground. Elias turned to the hybrids. Come on, kids. Time to go. Kale hesitated, looking at Queen Zitraxa. She was still locked in battle with Vatur, their movements too fast for the eye to follow. Sparks flew as their weapons clashed, and the Queen's powerful strikes dented Vatur's armor. But the rebel commander refused to fall. Elias cursed. We don't have time for this. He turned back to the hybrids. Go. Now. Kale was the first to move, leading the others into the tunnel. The scientists followed, guiding them quickly. Elias took one last look at the battle. Then he made a choice. He rushed towards Zitraxa. She and Vatur were locked in a deadly struggle, neither willing to back down. Elias raised his weapon and fired. The shot struck Vatur's blade, knocking it away just long enough for Zitraxa to deliver a devastating final blow. Vatur staggered back, clutching his chest. He looked at the Queen, shock in his eyes. You have doomed us, he whispered. Zitraxa did not answer. Vatur collapsed, unmoving. Elias grabbed her arm. No time to celebrate, Your Majesty. We have to go. Zitraxa hesitated, looking at her fallen warrior. Then she turned and followed Elias into the tunnel, sealing it behind them. A new beginning, or a new war? As they moved through the underground tunnels, Elias finally let out a breath. They had escaped. For now. Zitraxa looked at the hybrids, her expression unreadable. Elias crouched beside Kale. You okay, kid? Kale looked up at him. And then, for the second time in Iraq history, a hybrid smiled. Elias grinned. Yeah, you're gonna be just fine. But deep in his mind, he knew this was far from over. The war for the hybrids had only just begun. The underground tunnels were cold and silent. Elias Carter walked carefully, his weapon ready. Behind him, Queen Zitraxa moved with steady determination, leading the group of hybrid children and their remaining protectors deeper into the unknown. The young hybrids walked closely together, their small clawed hands sometimes brushing against the tunnel walls. Their eyes, wide and curious, glowed faintly in the dim light. They were scared but quiet, understanding, in their own way, that this was a time for survival, not questions. Elias glanced back at them, and then at the Queen. How much farther? Ztraxa didn't answer immediately. Her antennae twitched as she focused on the tunnel ahead. These tunnels were abandoned long ago. We should reach a safe chamber soon. Draska, the elderly scientist, walked beside them. Safe chamber, he repeated, his voice doubtful. Nowhere is safe, my queen. The rebels will hunt us. Elias sighed. Then we make sure they don't find us. The group moved forward, but tension filled the air. They had escaped the hive, but for how long? Vatur's rebellion had only begun. A hidden haven. After what felt like hours, the tunnel widened into a large underground chamber. The walls were covered in ancient carvings, symbols of past Hyrek rulers. Ztraxa stepped forward. This was once an old war bunker, before my time. Elias scanned the area with his flashlight. The space was large enough to fit all of them, and there were only 2 entrances, making it defensible. This will have to do, he said. The hybrids, sensing a moment of rest, huddled together near a corner. Some of them curled up, tired from the long journey. Kale, the bravest among them, stayed awake, his bright eyes watching everything. Ztraxa walked toward him. She lowered herself so that she was at his level. You are strong, she said softly. Kale tilted his head. Because I am like you. The Queen hesitated. Then, slowly, she shook her head. No, because you are more than me. Elias watched the interaction. She was changing. Before, Ztraxa had been a ruler first, a warrior second. But now, she was becoming something else. She was becoming a mother. The rebels are coming. Just as the moment of peace settled, Elias's communicator beeped. He grabbed it quickly and checked the signal. His stomach tightened. Damn it. Ztraxa turned to him. What is it? Elias's face was grim. They're coming. Draska tensed. How did they find us so fast? Elias thought about it. The rebels had taken over most of the hive, but they still needed to track the hybrids down. And then it clicked. They must have tracking devices on some of the children, he realized. They knew exactly where to search. Ztraxa's claws clenched. Then we must remove them. Elias nodded. But we don't have time. We need to prepare for a fight. The first defense. Ztraxa took charge immediately. We will split into 2 groups, she commanded. Elias, you and Draska will remove the tracking devices from the hybrids. I will take my warriors and defend the entrance. Elias hesitated. Are you sure? You're still recovering from your fight with Vatur. Ztraxa's eyes burned with determination. I will not let them take my children. Elias nodded. Then let's move. As Elias and Draska rushed to check the hybrids for hidden trackers, Ztraxa and her warriors positioned themselves at the tunnel entrance. Moments later, the ground trembled. The sound of marching footsteps echoed from the tunnel. The rebels had arrived. Ztraxa's warriors gripped their weapons tightly, ready for battle. The Queen stood at the front, her stance strong. The time for talking was over. Now, they fought for survival. A battle in the dark. The first wave of rebels charged into the chamber. Ztraxa met them head-on. Her 4 powerful arms moved with terrifying speed, striking down the first warrior before he could react. Energy blasts flew through the air, illuminating the chamber in flashes of blue and red. Her warriors fought fiercely, but the rebels were many. They had been prepared for this fight. Elias could hear the battle from the back of the chamber as he worked. Draska, hurry up. The scientist's hand shook as he scanned Kale for a tracker. Almost. There. He removed a tiny metallic chip from Cal's back and crushed it under his foot. Elias turned to the next child. Keep going. We don't have much time. At the entrance, Ztraxa was still holding her ground, but the rebels were relentless. She blocked a blade with her lower arms and struck back with her upper ones, sending her attacker flying into the wall. But as she turned, another rebel leaped at her from behind. She didn't see him in time. But Kale did. The hybrid child, still standing near Elias, acted on instinct. He grabbed a small broken piece of metal from the ground and threw it with all his strength. The sharp fragment hit the rebel's hand, making him drop his weapon. Ztraxa spun around and finished him in one swift move. For a brief moment, she locked eyes with Kale. The child had just saved her life. A new emotion filled her heart. Pride. The turning point. Draska removed the last tracking device. Done. Elias grabbed his communicator. Ztraxa, we got them all. The queen heard his voice through the chaos. She gritted her teeth. The rebels were still coming, but now they had no way to track the children if they escaped. She made a decision. Fall back, she commanded. Her warriors hesitated. But my queen. Now, reluctantly, they obeyed. They retreated toward the escape tunnel, covering each other as they moved. Elias waved them in. Come on, hurry. Ztraxa was the last to enter, sealing the tunnel behind her. They had escaped again. But Elias knew one thing. This wasn't over. Votur's forces were getting stronger. And next time, they wouldn't just be running. Next time, they would have to end this war. The underground tunnel was quiet, except for the soft sound of footsteps. Elias Carter moved cautiously, his pulse still racing from the battle they had just escaped. Behind him, Queen Ztraxa walked with steady confidence, though her body bore the signs of exhaustion. The hybrid children followed closely, their small hands gripping onto one another. They had been forced to run too many times. It had to end now. Elias looked at Ztraxa. We can't keep running. Sooner or later, Votur's forces will find us again. Ztraxa's black eyes met his. I know. Draska, the elderly scientist, adjusted the scanner in his hands. There's an old stronghold not far from here. If we reach it, we might have a chance. Elias sighed. A chance to do what? Hide forever. Ztraxa's voice was calm but firm. No, a chance to fight back. Elias studied her face. Something had changed in her. She wasn't just running anymore. She was preparing for war. The final strategy. The group reached the abandoned stronghold within an hour. It was hidden inside a deep cavern, its walls covered in old battle markings from a war long past. Inside, Elias examined the structure. It was defensible, thick walls, only one entrance, and enough supplies to last a few days. He turned to Ztraxa. We can hold them off here, but we'll be outnumbered. Ztraxa's antennae twitched. Not if we make them believe they are outnumbered. Draska frowned. What do you mean, my queen? She stepped forward, her powerful claws clicking together. We do not need an army. We only need a trap. Elias's eyes lit up. I like the way you think. Preparing the trap. They worked quickly. Elias and Draska set up old defense turrets, repairing them with whatever tech they could find. Ztraxa's warriors positioned hidden explosives around the entrance, designed to collapse part of the tunnel if needed. The hybrid children, too young to fight, were placed in a secure chamber deep within the stronghold. Kale, the firstborn, hesitated before going inside. He looked up at Ztraxa. Will you come back? Ztraxa bent down and placed a clawed hand on his shoulder. I promise. Elias watched the exchange and felt a deep respect for her. She wasn't just their queen anymore. She was their protector. Votur's arrival. It didn't take long. Hours later, the ground trembled. The sound of marching troops filled the cavern. Votur had come. The rebel commander stood at the entrance, his warriors surrounding him. His mandibles twitched in anger as he looked at the stronghold. You cannot hide forever, Ztraxa. His voice echoed through the chamber. This is your last chance. Surrender the hybrids, and I will spare the rest of your people." Elias rolled his eyes. "Yeah, sure." Straxus stepped forward, standing tall. "I will never surrender them." Vatur's eyes darkened. "Then you will all fall." He raised his weapon, and the trap was sprung. The battle begins. The moment Vatur's forces stepped forward, the hidden turrets activated. Energy blasts rained down on the rebels, forcing them to take cover. Straxus' warriors charge, using their knowledge of the terrain to strike fast and disappear before the enemy could react. Elias, crouched behind cover, took careful shots, aiming for enemy weapons and weak points in their armor. The rebels fought back fiercely, but they hadn't expected resistance this strong. Vatur roared in frustration. "Push forward. Overwhelm them." More rebels surged ahead. Straxa met them head-on, her 4 arms striking with deadly precision. She moved like a force of nature, fast, relentless, unstoppable. Elias took down a rebel sneaking toward her. "You're getting famous, Your Majesty." She didn't take her eyes off the fight. "Good. Let them fear me." But then, a blast shook the ground. One of the defense turrets exploded, sending debris flying. The rebels charged through the gap. Vatur grinned. "You are finished." Elias's stomach dropped. They had to fall back, or they would be overwhelmed. Straxa glanced at him. "Are the hybrids safe?" "Yes, but..." She nodded. "Then we do what must be done." Elias realized what she meant. "Wait, no." But it was too late. Straxa gave the signal. The final move. A massive explosion rocked the cavern as the hidden charges detonated. The walls collapsed, cutting off Vatur's reinforcements and trapping him inside with them. Now it was just him against Straxa and her warriors. Elias smirked. Now that's strategy. Vatur, realizing he had been outplayed, snarled in rage. "You think you've won." Straxa stepped forward. "You never understood, Vatur. This was never about winning a war." Her eyes glowed with fierce determination. This was about saving the future. Vatur lunged at her, his blade swinging. But Straxa was ready. With one swift motion, she dodged, countered, and struck, her powerful arms slamming him into the ground. Vatur gasped, his strength failing. He looked up at her, realization in his eyes. He had lost. Straxa stood over him. "Your rebellion ends today." Elias stepped forward. "What do we do with him?" Straxa was silent for a moment. Then she turned away. "Leave him." He made his choice. As Vatur lay on the ground, watching them walk away, he understood the truth. The future of the Tyrak species was no longer in his hands. A new beginning. The battle was over. The hybrids were safe. Straxa stood outside the stronghold, looking at the distant horizon. For the first time in a long while, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Elias leaned beside her. "So, what now?" Straxa's mandibles twitched in what might have been a smile. "Now," she said, "we build a new world." Kale, standing nearby, looked up at them. His eyes were filled with possibility. The first hybrid, the first of many. Elias smirked. "Well, that sounds like a lot of work." Straxa's gaze was firm. "It will be." Elias chuckled. "Good. I was getting bored anyway." As the sun rose over the distant mountains, a new era began. Not for humans, not for the Tyrak, but for something greater. For both.